Shalom WJC family. Time for our weekly Torah talk. The Torah portion this week is Naso, the second portion in the book of Bamidbar, the fourth book of the Torah. And as we get into this time of in the wilderness, which is what Bamidbar means, we sort of have a multivariate parsha full of a bunch of different topics. But probably, arguably, the most famous topic to come from Parshat Naso or passage is the Kohanic blessing. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. It's a passage we use to bless our children on Friday nights, a passage that we read, we state, the leader of the prayer states during the repetition of the Amidah, and so many other places it comes up again and again. And it makes sense. God tells the Kohanim that through giving this blessing, it will link them with God. I was thinking about this time right now with 3 months into the coronavirus pandemic, the chaos breaking across our country in response to the killing of George Floyd and to so many similar incidences and the injustices done to African American people and communities of color. But what should our response be? And it seems to me that the best response we can do is to insert blessing into the world. And we see a world full of evil and corruption and dissension and disunity. The best thing that we can do is bring blessing into the world, like God tells the Kohanim to do in this parsha. But what blessing do we bring? What is the blessing, the most important blessing for us to bring? Is it justice? Is it protection? Well, if we look at the blessing itself, the Kohanic blessing, I think we get some answers. The blessing is in 3 parts, and it builds on itself, each one containing Adonai, the name of God, but the first line having 3 words, and then 5 words, and then the third line finally having 7 words. You can tell that there's something building. So the first part of the blessing, Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, means may God bless you and protect you. The second part of the blessing, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha, is usually translates something like, may God show you favor and grant you grace. But a maybe more literal translation, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha, means may God turn his face to you, v'yichunecha, and give you grace. And then finally, Yisa Adonai panav elecha, v'yasem lecha shalom, means may God lift up God's face to you, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom, and place upon you peace, shalom. So, if our job is to channel this blessing into the world, how does that work? How do we prioritize it? And another interesting feature of the blessing that I want to point out is that our position relative to God changes in the blessing. And I think it's giving us a mission that is very relevant right now. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May God bless and protect you. In that first part of the blessing, we seem to be low and God is high, right? God's going to protect us, v'yishmerecha, going to shelter over us and make sure that we are safe. God, in that sense, is the parent and we are the child, needing God's protection. Then, in the second verse, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha, may God turn God's countenance to you and give you grace. That seems to be that we're at the same level now. We're peers. Right? God's not looking down on us anymore. God turned God's face to you. Now we seem to have become equal partners somehow in the realm of grace, bringing grace into the world. We'll talk about what that means. And then the last part, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May God lift God's eyes to you and grant you peace. Now somehow God seems to be low and we're high. God's lifting God's eyes to us and granting us peace. So what's going on here? What are we to learn from this? Well, there's all different levels of blessing. And may God bless you and protect you when we bring the most basic blessings into the world. The blessings of blessing itself and the blessing of, of protection, right? The most basic thing that we can bring into the world, we're doing good. We are representing God in the world. God's up there and we're down here, and we are bringing protection to people. And it is our job to bring protection to people, particularly people who are weak and cannot protect themselves. That is a basic blessing that we as Jews are supposed to bring into the world. And this moment calls for us to do that, to cry out to protect those who need protection the most. And the second part of the blessing, when we are now sort of on equal footing with God, may God turn God's face to us, vichunecha, and give us grace. Grace is such an odd term. Right? What does grace mean, to have God's grace? It means we're seeking favor for no reason, that we don't deserve. Right? But for the grace of God, there go I. Grace is those who find favor from God, even though God has no real reason to give it to us. And when we represent God in the world, it's when we bring grace to others. It's when we treat people better and protect them and bless them, even though they might have done nothing to earn that blessing, except being human and being people. Even though they might have no seemingly connection to us, this reminds us we are all connected because we are human and we are people. And so we elevate ourselves when we can go from this blessing of basic protection to this next level of bringing grace to people we don't even know, because we recognize the humanity in them, we recognize the divinity of them. When we can do that, when we can be gracious in the world to others, we achieve this partnership with God. But then the last line, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom, may God raise God's eyes up to us, raise God's face up to us, v'yasem lecha shalom, and make peace. That when we evolve even from grace, bringing blessing and protection into the world for those who need it most, and then being gracious to all people, whether we know them or not, whether we think they deserve it or not. It's not for us to decide. They are people. But when we bring those into the world, and then the highest level, when we bring shalom into the world, when we work for peace, when we work for unity, right? Shalom comes from shalem, shalem, to be whole. When we recognize that we are all one whole under God. When we recognize that our role is to bring peace into the world. And I think maybe there is no higher blessing than that right now. Right? That we so desperately need peace between people, with each other. But why does God look up to us when it comes to making peace? Because we are the only ones who can make peace in the world. God has given us the lessons. God has taught us about blessing and protection and grace. God has taught us about values and the interconnectedness of us all. But our role ultimately is to take all of that and to bring it into the world, to recognize the shlemut of us all, how we are all connected as children and creations of God. And it is our job to bring that wholeness into the world, to bring that integrity into the world, to bring shalom, to bring peace into the world. Our job, and only our job. For that job, God looks up to us. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. God looks up to us to bring that peace into the world, and that's what we need to do now. We need to do it by listening to each other, by doing what we can to bring calm and respect for all people, to bring security so that all people can feel safe, and only in safety can we then start to work out our grievances and ultimately find forgiveness and tshuva, repentance, atonement for the sins that have been committed and the ones in which we may be complicit. Peace. That is the ultimate blessing, and it comes through us. Isa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May we all grow to that ultimately high level where only humanity can succeed in bringing peace. That peace that we so desperately need right now. May we have success in that as we turn towards this peaceful Shabbat. I wish you a Shabbat Shalom. May we all be living in a place of Shalom that we help create as we are intended to do, bringing that blessing into the world.